So, welcome to our first virtual conversation hosted by Gregory Eddie Jones. This will be the first kind of season of New Histories. We're going to have 3 episodes, and then we are going to um, uh, have season 2, season 3 in the future. This is kind of a pilot project at the moment, but we expect a lot of good things from it. So I'm going to introduce Gregory. Actually, I'm going to talk about the Racklin Murphy Museum of Art and Yield generally first. So the University of Notre Dame is the organization that we run Yield through, which is a online photography magazine. We're kind of in transition a little bit. We're trying to move, from kind of the traditional contemporary photography world into more of the new media photography world and try to engage more with NFTs, NFT photography, AI photography, still connect back with our collection that we have here. And that collection is at the Racklin Murphy Museum of Art, which is a new museum on the campus of University of Notre Dame. It opens December 1st of this year. And then we also have a research center where the photography department will be primarily located. And that's where Yield, is our domain as well. So the Racklin Murphy is an encyclopedic art museum. We have about roughly 25,000 objects. The new museum has about 1,000 objects on view. And like I said, it'll be opening December 5th or 1st. So I'll introduce Gregory. Gregory Eddie Jones is an artist and writer based between New York and Philadelphia. His practices broadly focus on photography and its technological and historical context. From 2012 to 2021, he was the founding editor of In the In-Between, an online journal that spotlighted artists working in the intersections of photography and digital technology. He has contributed writing to various publications in recent years, including Foam Magazine, Unseen Magazine, Lens Culture, After Image, and Paper Journal, among others. His most recent essay on speculative questions surrounding AI and photography will be published by Dear Dave magazine this winter. So I will hand it over to Gregory. He will give an introduction to the project, and then we'll move on to Shane.
Great. Thank you, Mike. And thank you especially to both Yield Magazine and Racklin Murphy Museum for hosting us. Before I officially introduce our inaugural guest, I want to offer a brief introduction to this conversation series as a whole, and to train our lens on the set of ideas that we'll be focusing on as it relates to this idea of new histories. The history of photography is a history of technology. With each new significant development of picture-making tools come new aesthetics, new distribution models, and new cultures of image making that move us from one era to the next. And because of its position as a tech-driven medium, photography, since its beginnings, has existed in a state of continual evolution, much of which is in service to the desire to both make and share pictures in relation to the ever-changing economy of images. Within each stage of this evolution, we find the development of new visual traditions that seek to break from the past, all while working to form new visual vocabularies to define the current day. And if we take these ideas as our starting point, then we can begin to understand how quickly the nature of photography is changing now. In just a recent handful of years, the technologies relating to NFTs, to artificial intelligence, and to augmented and virtual realities have begun molding new possibilities of how photographic literatures are made and experienced. And it seems that we've entered into a new technological era and passed through a new threshold where it now feels ripe to take stock of the histories of the medium within present-day contexts and to speculate on photography's potentially radical futures. So this is what we hope to do with this conversation series, to simultaneously look backwards and forwards towards where the medium has been and where it's going, and to consider photography perhaps not as a singular medium, but as a constellation of media that's ever-changing and that speaks in languages that may be unfamiliar to those that we've known before. Most importantly, the goal of the series is to learn from artists and curators who are actively engaged with these new photographic models, to hear about their experiences, to learn about their practices, and to understand just what more photography can be as we move further into the 21st century. With that, I'm very pleased to introduce our inaugural guest, Shane Lavalette. Welcome, Shane. Shane is an artist and the co-founder of Assembly, a Houston-based gallery and agency supporting a roster of contemporary artists. In 2021, Assembly Curated was launched as the first curated art photography NFT platform, highlighting important and innovative artists engaging with blockchain technology. Lavalette has previously worked as the director of a nonprofit organization, Lightwork, from 2011 to 2021, an organization I know quite well. And he has worked as an independent curator, publisher, writer, and consultant to collectors, institutions, photo editors, and artists. Lavalette has a broad range of professional experience in creative direction, production, editing, design, art buying, fundraising. There's nothing he can't do. I added that in myself. And throughout his career, he's been passionate about advocating to make the field more equitable for artists. Thank you, Shane, for being with us, and please take it away.
Wow, thanks, Greg. Yeah, that was an excellent introduction, and I appreciate that. I wanted to say thanks both to you and to Mike for thinking of me for this conversation. I think it's great to see these kinds of conversations happening within institutions, and this vision for this conversation series and what it might lead to as a, seed planted for some bigger things in the future is really exciting to me. I think and how you position photography, Greg, it's definitely how I think about the medium. My interest obviously is photography, but my whole career has just been about like images and the photographic. And I think of the medium of photography as being expansive. And as you alluded to, even in its invention, its early days, it's kind of always had an integral or even inherent relationship with technology. So, over the years, I think we see evolutions of new expansions of image distribution or tools for image creation. And along the way, the things that we sort of don't understand kind of evoke fear or confusion for people. And, I think AI is one of those things, and NFTs are one of those things. Photoshop was one of those things. Digital photography itself was one of those things. So I think that, with enough time, we kind of navigate what these tools and technologies are and how they have a place in our world. And, for artists, I think the exciting part is how to utilize those tools or technologies. So for today, I kind of prepared a pretty brief presentation that covers some of my involvement, focusing on the NFT photography space, and it includes a little bit of a 101 for blockchain and NFTs for people who might be less familiar. Included some questions at the end, which we can kind of open into a conversation. Hopefully Greg and Mike have some interesting questions to kick us off, but it sounds like we might be able to expand it to whomever has questions who's popping in, if they want to write them in the chat, or maybe afterwards we can have anyone ask. But let me just see if I can get this presentation up here. And maybe you all let me know if that looks okay.
Yeah, it looks great.
Okay. So as I mentioned, I think when it comes to NFTs, sometimes I don't know, media stories or kind of clickbait articles drive our understanding of what NFTs are. And, really what sparked my interest in what NFTs can be is the underlying technology. I think it's sort of like anything. I mean, the same thing happens within the world of art or photography. There's all kinds of things that happen, and some of them are going to be interesting to some people, and lots of them are going to be uninteresting to some people. So, for me, what was exciting was just this recognition that I had, and this probably was around 2020, most certainly sparked by the pandemic, sparked by our lives being more digital, being connected with each other more digitally. But this recognition that creating and collecting art is going to become more and more a digital experience in our lives, and very likely will not become less and less of an experience. And, even as the world returned to more physical experiences, these kinds of spaces and connections are really, really important. And so, when it comes to NFTs, I think it was in March of 2021 that my colleague and co-founder of Assembly, Ashlyn Davis Burns, and I put our head together to launch this platform. And when we began, we were thinking about the models within the commercial art world and how they're broken, or I think the pandemic was also this time of reimagining. So we were thinking, what can we create that is a more holistic gallery, agency, creative studio, really with the recognition that, to be a living artist usually means you wear many hats. And, I know this well. And I think Greg's intro to who I am says a lot about what it means to sort of live a life as a creative or an artist and kind of find support for yourself. But, you usually aren't just selling your prints. You're usually not just doing commissions. You're usually not just publishing and selling books. You're not just doing lectures or talks, and you're not, just licensing your work. So there's this kind of expansive way that artists work, and we wanted to create a platform that could support artists across all of those modes of working. So, the roster of artists that we work with more closely, we do everything from developing, to working with artists on grant writing, to finding publishing or grants for their work, funding for their work to make it happen, to editing and sequencing book projects, to develop and pitch to book publishers, to cultivating contextual articles and writing that are going to lend more insights into artists' work and practice, to all of the things that a traditional art gallery might do, like placing works with collectors, or an agency might do, like interfacing with magazines and brands and supporting artists in various kinds of commissions. And that expansive way of thinking about what representation means is what led us into the world of Web3 and NFTs. We were working with a number of artists who were very interested in blockchain technology, and I personally was very interested as well. And we kind of kicked off that journey by working with an artist named Alejandro Cartagena, who is very well known for his Carpooler series. And, Alejandro is someone who is kind of tireless in his artistic practice. Anyone who knows him knows his boundless energy and ideas. And he's someone who I think really understands images and image making, and, how images operate as sort of cultural vessels in the world. And so, his Carpooler's work has been collected by a lot of individuals and museums and institutions. And when we went into this journey together to figure out how it might live within the NFT space, there were a lot of kind of questions and concerns. And ultimately, we launched what was, an early art photography collection together that was cohesive, that kind of brought the qualities that we appreciate in photography and photography exhibitions and photography books. And, it took some time to kind of figure out, but there was a world of collecting happening within the NFT space, but there wasn't kind of a place to go for art photography. There was, zero curatorial spaces or platforms. And so, Ashley and I, as both individuals who have run nonprofits for the past couple decades, felt like there was an opportunity to bring value there and to educate and introduce collectors to works that we think are important, and kind of drive conversations about value to be about artistic and cultural value for the work. So, we saw a really huge success with Alejandro's work, and it sparked secondary market sales and activity, and sort of showed us some of the possibilities, albeit, maybe unrealistic expectations for every artist to have when it comes to introducing their work in this space. But the kind of energy and interest that was garnered from creating this project together led us to think about a series and a way of developing a program to work with artists to help them navigate this digital space. In many ways, it's like the physical art world. There's a lot of best practices and different ways of approaching how to do things, from how you print and the kind of papers you use, or the how you sign an edition works and how you price works and all these things. So being able to kind of be a resource and educate ourselves and understand this technology and help artists navigate that space was something we recognized held value early on. So, we really believe that Web3 technologies are poised to continue to shift the art market. They essentially offer a unique solution to preserve value and provenance digitally. So the NFT space has kind of become an important emerging market for artists to find long-term support for their activities, as well as an exciting space for conceptual gestures that expand what's possible for artists and their practice. So just a little bit of a 101 in defining some of these terms that we're talking about. An NFT is essentially just a unique digital identifier that's secured and stored in a public blockchain. It's used to certify ownership and authenticity on its most simplest terms. Most commonly, although not exclusively, an NFT will represent a digital asset, such as, in this case, a piece of visual art. And blockchain itself, you can just think of like a decentralized ledger that facilitates the process of recording transactions and tracking assets. So ledgers record transactions and accounts. You can almost think of it like a database that is, decentralized. It's open, it's trustless, it's permissionless. And transactions on blockchain are therefore irreversible, they're permanent, they're validated by this network, and they're available for everyone to see, transparent. So smart contracts are another thing that I alluded to, but they're essentially one of the things that got me really excited about a particular blockchain that's called Ethereum.
Shane, sorry to interrupt. I just want to double check. Are you going through slides or?
Yes.
Can the rest of you guys see them? Because I just see the assembly website.
Yeah, I just see the assembly website also.
Oh gosh. Okay, here, hold on. Let me switch over.
The presentation has been great so far. We're just not seeing the slides.
Yeah, we need to get you some of the visuals here.
It's that share screen, share window. That always gets me.
Do you see it now?
We see your entire desktop now.
That's okay. I guess I can just do that. How's that?
Looks good.
Okay, so all you missed was, some of these visuals that, this is a piece of Alejandro's from his Carpooler series. We talked a bit about NFT, the definitions of blockchain, and smart contracts themselves. So, the smart contract runs automatically without the need for a third-party intermediary. NFTs are minted on the smart contracts, which govern their use and can enable artist royalties on sales of NFTs in perpetuity. This was a really exciting revelation for me. I think as I mentioned, I got interested in Ethereum in maybe 2017, but it wasn't until 2020 into 21 that I really saw the potential for visual art to enable some possibilities for artists. And, we think about the secondary market within the traditional art world, and a piece goes up to auction and pretty much never does the artist see a percentage of that sale, or if it exchanged hands between individual collectors, the same. And so smart contracts offered this ability to sort of govern these digital works, but also incorporate elements like royalties. I've used the term Web3 a couple times, and so it's kind of a term that's a little bit difficult to define for some people, but we can kind of think of it just as the next iteration of the web, or a web that's based around some of these ideas of decentralized networks and access. So with Web 1, you might imagine like, I don't know, AOL online and connecting with your dial-up router and being kind of fed information that this centralized entity is allowing you to see or experience. And with Web 2, you might think of like, I don't know, social media, the explosion of blogging, social identities, and being able to interact with each other online. And Web3 sort of builds upon the way that the internet operates at this point, but utilizing what we call digital wallets that serve as digital identities, and giving creators, especially, the ability to create and manage their intellectual property, their art, their ideas. You can explore Web3 social platforms that might operate like Facebook or Instagram, but instead of, as an artist, kind of freely giving your content to a company that's usually selling your information and profiting off of you existing on it in the first place, a Web3 social media platform is a protocol that you can connect to, you can create on, and in some cases you can even disconnect from and take your content with you, or take your kind of followers with you and reconnect to a different protocol and engage. So there's some interesting possibilities when it comes to thinking about Web3 in broader terms. With photography in the early 2000s, photography experienced one of its many evolutions with the digital revolution that I referred to. Suddenly, photography was ubiquitous, immensely reproducible, and easily forged with copy paste, right click, save as. You might, maybe some people even still do it. People put watermarks on photographs. It's kind of like this futile attempt to sort of keep track or put a stamp on your work. And in some ways, NFT technology provides some of that ability to authenticate and create ownership. So provenance remains a huge challenge within the digital space. So there's blockchain with a really efficient solution, essentially tracking the creation of work and its movement on primary and secondary markets. We'll talk a lot about kind of the financialization here, because that's inherent in some of the space, but it does not necessarily have to be. It can be used as a tool to archive, to incorporate metadata, to socialize archives in interesting ways. There's a lot of possibilities. But we really believe that this will become a standard of authenticity in the near future. In 2023, it kind of makes no sense to have a paper certificate of authenticity. The California DMV, for example, is utilizing a proprietary version of the Tezos blockchain to track and manage car titles, for example. So much broader than the art world, you can kind of imagine the ways in which the technology is useful for authentication and ownership. So speaking of the market, just a glimpse at the traditional art market as a $60 billion market that's developed over the last hundreds of years. Within that, the NFT collectibles market, which the numbers might be down a bit now, but the $45 billion market that's developed over the last 5 years or so. The art photography market is a relatively small part of the overall art market. If we're to kind of isolate it, it's really developed just over the last 50 years or so at 2.5 billion. And just in the last 2 to 3 years, the NFT photography market, as it's emerged, has become a $100 million plus market, and it's still developing. So this is really just to kind of give you a picture at some of the transacting that's happening and how early we are to thinking about this digital space as a market and as a space for commerce. Millennials emerged as adults during an era of enormous technological transformation. just thinking about the 2020s, we're seeing the greatest wealth transfer in history, about $4 trillion that's moving from baby boomers to millennials. And over the last few decades, and the last decade in particular, we saw a dramatic rise of the photography art market and online collecting, even though it remains one of the more difficult markets, I guess you could say, in terms of the broader art world. Web3 and blockchain technology has created enormous wealth, and most millennial millionaires own crypto. It's still a developing technology in itself, and like cryptocurrency and digital assets are foreign to a lot of people, but for new generations, it's not a strange concept. Web3 and blockchain technologies are poised to continue to radically shift the art and collectibles markets in the year to come, even just thinking about some of these anecdotes. Collecting itself has just become more, frictionless, without barriers. You have transparency. You can do it from anywhere in the world. I think there are a lot of people that are critical or kind of don't like the dance that you sometimes have to do or feel like you have to do to engage with the contemporary art world. And, when the pandemic happened, we definitely saw an explosion in online art buying, from everything from Instagram to, online arts platforms like Artsy, and blockchain and NFTs are sort of an extension of that as well. It's this space that is immediate, it's highly transparent. This definitely, digital collecting is a concept that does not appeal to every collector. But for the collectors that it does appeal to, it's extremely exciting. It's a highly efficient mode of supporting artists. And then, it's actually expanding the reach of the contemporary art world too. One interesting thing about the NFT space that, we've observed and been interested in and kind of cultivated is that it is a community. It's happening in spaces like Twitter, or now X, a social app called Discord. Being able to create these spaces to exchange ideas, to collaborate, is an exciting aspect about this. And a lot of artists and individuals and collectors have kind of come together into, one room, so to speak, from all over the world, to have exchanges with each other and engage in a way that, is not impossible outside of the world of NFTs, but is kind of supported by it in an interesting way. So Assembly launched our Discord community, and it's, now over 5,000 members, which is comprised primarily of NFT collectors. And then a lot of the conversations about NFTs and digital art happen in, Discord and Telegram and all of these social apps. So for artists, NFTs provide a new collector base, the primary market, and they offer, as I mentioned, the potential for this long-term passive revenue and support, maybe receiving up to 10% of royalties on the secondary market, as we talked about, enabled by smart contracts. So from a collector's perspective, it's this method of preserving provenance. It's a safeguard for an investment. It serves as a highly efficient way of supporting an artist and having some sort of investment in, their social or artistic capital. Here's a quote that kind of reflects that. An NFT collector who goes by Freddie, and he talks about how he would value his NFTs higher than his physical prints, in fact, because of these global trends. The innovation in digital provenance, he says, through blockchain finally allows us to introduce scarcity to things with infinite copies on a global scale. So for Assembly, we present work on its own terms on blockchain using proper provenance and perpetuity. And we're interested in the qualities and values of the contemporary art world while connecting it with new audiences. In many instances, we've connected with collectors and art enthusiasts who are kind of discovering the world of digital collecting, and then through that discovering the world of fine art, publishing, all of these other things that many of us have appreciated for a long time. So galleries can acquire the ability to broaden their collector base, and with a side benefit maybe of cultivating new collectors for more physical artwork. And then I think vice versa as well. Certainly that's something we've thought about. So our marketplace offers custom smart contract solutions for artists. Here's an example that was when we collaborated with the artist Alex Soth. And, it preserves the creator wallet. It's fully owned by the artist, and the NFTs are minted to that smart contract. And this is just one example in very simple terms of what we might consider proper provenance within that digital space, as opposed to perhaps minting on a shared contract or things like that, which might be more akin to, I don't know, publishing within a magazine or something like that within the physical art world. So Assembly Curated projects launch from our own platform. It's a site that we've developed that's fully Web3 capable. You can go to it, you can connect your wallet. And since the summer of 2021, we've launched over 30 NFT collections by artists around the world. And currently artists are selected on invitation-only basis. But we have some interesting ideas in the pipeline to expand that. Here's just a peek at what the platform looks like. So it's relatively simple, but when we started out in the world of NFTs, one of the things that we saw was that the marketplaces that existed were not really built for photography. So really basic things like sequencing or slideshows and kind of developing a photographic experience that we might be more familiar with from exhibitions and books and kind of working in projects that are, termed collections within the world of NFTs. We wanted to create a space that was kind of image forward, that really celebrated the art and allowed you to really easily experience the work, even if you're not interested in transacting, for example. It's a place of discovery for great artists who are doing important work. So in the summer of 2022, we opened the doors to our Houston-based gallery. And we're interested in a number of things when it comes to having a physical space. Obviously, the experience of having a community around art and getting together beyond this digital world, on the other side of a pandemic, and returning to that. And because we've been operating in this digital space, we're really interested in bridging the physical and digital collecting worlds. As I alluded to, supporting what might be termed NFT curious collectors and providing a sort of white glove service to help them acquire their first NFTs, as well as the other direction, helping what we might call digitally native collectors on growing their physical art collections for the first time. So some of the artists we've worked with, I think top left is David Alakuogi, top right is Vasantha Younganathan, bottom left is Cristina Velasquez, and bottom right is Rodrigo Valenzuela. Some of these artists have explored NFTs for their work and practice, and others haven't. Actually, I think all of these shows have examples of sort of celebrating the opposite and kind of the physical experience of work. With David, he works with textiles and fabric. With Vasantha, he has a section of his A Myth of Two Souls series that is hand-painted photographs. Cristina Velasquez, as an extension of her photographic practice, also works in weaving. And then Rodrigo Valenzuela's work that we showed from his Weapons series are mixed media, although photographic. But in addition, we've hosted exhibitions that kind of probe into this interest in the fluidity of digital creating and digital collecting and physical creating and physical collecting. In the summer of 2023, we partnered with a platform called Art Blocks, which happens to be kind of born out of Houston and have Houston connections. But it's a leading global platform supporting artists who are working with code and algorithms to develop generative art, which has a long history. Computer art, it goes back to generative art goes back to 60s, 70s, and an explosion of computer art. But when blockchain technology came along, it kind of created new opportunities for the experience of creating the work, as well as kind of a relationship between collectors and the artist, or the collector in a way kind of having a hand in the creation of the work by generating these pieces through the algorithms. So the show included actually a piece by Greg, which involves AI, included a mix of photographic prints, digital screens showing both photographs and generative works. And it was really this opportunity to kind of think about photography and image making, especially at this point, as being pretty much digitally native. So having actually a pretty direct relationship with artists that work with code, and thinking about images as literally being zeros and ones for the most part. So, we're definitely very interested in furthering those conversations and thinking about how we can utilize our space to educate. We've had a great group through not too long ago who are, patrons in the Houston arts scene who, I would say maybe 80% were pretty new to NFTs. So that's an exciting thing to be able to engage with people and help them kind of understand the value in the technology and sort of look beyond, as I mentioned early on, as I was leading into this, the sort of clickbait articles and other things that might happen within the world of crypto or NFTs, and really just look at it, on its own terms, as a technology that's being used in very interesting ways by artists and platforms. I included a couple frequently asked questions that we get just as a way to kind of lead into a conversation. But one of the questions that a lot of people ask is selling an NFT giving up copyright or licensing for the image? And, it's a complicated question and answer, actually, but the short answer is no. Selling an NFT means transferring ownership of the digital token itself, and it does not affect reproduction rights, copyright, or licensing for the work unless it's noted within when selling the NFT. So some artists utilize the smart contract that I talked about as a means to incorporate their interest around licensing and copyright. A lot of people ask, how do you handle NFTs for works that already have print editions? In some ways you can, think about it like books or posters or all these other ways that photography exists in the world. But a lot of artists, approach it in that a physical work can have, say, 10 print editions, but still have a unique one-of-one piece as an NFT, the sort of digitally native, unique identifier for that particular work of art, and thinking about the images and their significance in broader terms. How you edition NFTs doesn't have to mirror print editions. It's still being experimented with in interesting ways by artists, where when you collect a digital token, you might be able to claim a physical thing. Sometimes the other way around, a physical thing that includes, a QR code or a chip that allows you to claim a digital certificate of authenticity. And some platforms and artists are experimenting with using the NFT technology very directly as a means to be a certificate of authenticity and have a relationship with physical works of art. Another question that we kind of get is how to display NFTs. And I think the answer to this is really different for different people and collectors, and depends a lot on the motivation or institutions. But of course, it's almost a form of public art. I feel like in some ways what exists on the internet is like that. So Web3 platforms, marketplaces, curated platforms. There's a lot of sites that almost function like, say, I don't know, Squarespace, where you can have creativity over how you design online galleries and present work that you might have collected in the digital space. There's also interactive galleries, so like immersive virtual spaces. It could be VR. There's a platform called Voxels or OnCyber. It allows users to, in some cases, buy or rent virtual space, or in most cases, it's free space where you can design and build a gallery and curate exhibitions with work. Artists can do this, collectors can do this, and it's one interesting thing about the world of blockchain and NFTs as well, is that collecting is, I don't want to say it's performative, but it's public for the most part, right? So, being able to kind of see what people own, to see collections, to understand, if you're an artist, where your work lives, is actually very interesting within this space. And you might, as an artist, sometimes have the ability to, go to a collector's home for dinner, or see your work in context with whatever it's hung next to, or understand it within an institution. But it's not always the case that you can do that. So I think it's kind of a fascinating thing. And then, of course, I mentioned digital frames. So monitors that are designed to fulfill the requirements for digital art. I think that technology in itself is developing pretty rapidly. And I definitely think within the next 10 or 20 years, it will be, we'll have things on the wall that we didn't expect to have. And kind of the surfaces and the options and the framing is going to become more complex in a way that, we really wanted to emphasize when we did that exhibition with art blocks, for example, that, it's not just like a digital piece on a TV monitor. It's instead a intentional piece of digital art that in some cases can actually have almost like a tactility to it. But, of course, if you're a collector and you're interested in a physical piece, you're going to seek out that physical piece for that kind of physical tactility. And if you're, as I talked about, a collector that's interested in a digital work and all of the sort of benefits and reasons why you might want to own or collect a digital work or support an artist through this digital space, you're going to gravitate to that. So these are not, I think sometimes people kind of conflate the development of NFT technology and an explosion in interest in working with NFTs as being kind of this replacement for physical art, or like art is moving in this direction. And I think it's important to kind of step back and recognize, like, that's not at all the case. It's sort of like this complement to all the ways that artists currently work with distributing their work. And for collectors, it's a complement often to physically collecting, just kind of expands the way that you do things. So, I mean, a helpful example, I think, for a lot of people is kind of thinking about the world of music. And there are many people that deeply appreciate physical records and album art and kind of spending the time reading the liner notes and the way that an LP sounds, and all of these things. And you buy the record if you want that. And, if you want something else, you usually, stream it online and you sort of support the artist in a small way through royalties. And, I think there's some interesting developments when it comes to music in the world of Web3 as well, that can allow people to kind of have a bigger stake in more directly supporting artists. And, I think there's some challenges with the music industry in terms of how royalties operate and how it actually supports those musical artists. So just a helpful example to think about. But yeah, that's all I have in terms of a presentation and kind of leading us into a conversation. Hopefully that wasn't too long. That was longer than I meant it to be, but apologies for that.
No, that was wonderful. I mean, there's so much to unpack when it comes to NFTs. I did a 16-hour workshop on photography and NFTs about a year and a half ago, and it still wasn't enough time. So I think that was a really great introduction and overview. And just personally, it's been really pretty amazing to watch how Assembly has developed their NFT program, almost essentially from the beginning. I've been watching your program grow and evolve. So we have about 13 minutes, give or take. We can go longer if we need to. If anyone wants to jump in with any questions, comments, feel free. We can treat this as kind of an open forum. There's so much, again, to unpack about NFTs and their implications for how they fit within the traditional art market. How blockchain and the NFT ecosystem can offer new career pathways for artists, particularly younger emerging artists. And I think there's a lot to be said about the idea of NFTs as essentially a brand new model of publishing to make your work public, to offer it, to the broader community as a way to experience work for the first time in this kind of digital native way. And what initially interested me in the idea of NFTs is that fact that photography, for the most part now, is a medium that manifests mostly on the screen, right? We see photography through the screen so much more often than we see prints now. And so it seems natural for almost like a screen native photographic practice or experience to come to life. And I feel like NFTs have kind of facilitated that in a major way.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think the screen-based experience doesn't require NFTs, but I think that it's sort of enabled some of these things that has been needed in that digital space, like authenticity and ownership and provenance in a ways that's really exciting and really useful for a lot of artists. But I think my introduction to the art world and photo world was kind of through the internet as well. I mean, early on it was through books. Like I grew up in Vermont, and there weren't a lot of museums or galleries around, and photography books were kind of my entree to enjoying this medium. But then even when I was in college and studying photography, in 2005, I was kind of 3 through 10 or whatever it was, there was kind of this explosion of blogging and online communities. And I started interviewing artists and discovering artists through the internet on the other side of the world. And that was a truly exciting thing to me. But again, up until now, there hasn't really been a great solution for being able to kind of take an image that's yours, put it online, and put a stamp of, I've created this, and track that on some sort of decentralized ledger that's irrefutable. And I'm sure there's all kinds of other solutions, but this has just happened to emerge in a way that I think is particularly exciting to visual art and photography at this time. And for many artists, I think it was the thing that they were waiting for, right? Like a lot of artists work in, video and new media and do all these other things. And I mean, we talk with a lot of institutions about this. They're sort of like over the last, however many years, 30 years more, 40 years, have kind of struggled with thinking about how to accept digital media into a collection. And so there's also kind of this solution here that is really interesting for anything that's digitally native, of course, to immediately combine those things all in one. You have authenticity, ownership, and provenance all in one place. And then utilizing other blockchain technologies as well, you have potentially a lot more permanence than just putting, say, an online collection on a digital server that is centralized.
Yeah, and to you, the what you brought up in growing up in Vermont and not having access to exhibitions and things, I think there's something really to be said for how the NFT market offers artists access to a way of developing a career where they, perhaps previously weren't able to if they don't live in a major city, for example, or don't have those, artist supporting communities nearby to them to help foster their practice. You can mint and share an NFT from anywhere in the world, and it doesn't require all the legwork that maybe artists would have to go through in more traditional times, I guess I would put it. But
no, it's true. It's actually very sustainable at this point, depending on like which blockchains you're utilizing. It's interesting because early on there were a lot of pretty valid criticisms around blockchain technology and environmental concerns. And the good news is that a lot of that has evolved in the direction that most people thought it would for, say, blockchains like Ethereum, where they operate with proof of stake and no longer use proof of work. And, you're probably making less of a carbon footprint minting your entire life's work as a photographer on blockchain than, printing and mailing and shipping and storing one photograph and all of the things that come along with the carbon footprint of something like photography. So, but yeah, I think that accessibility point is really interesting. And it's definitely, in addition, I think created other modes of value, which, I think some people, it might be confusing to some people, but, you have like social value that can be connected to artists as well. So by being present, by being engaged, by engaging in conversations and sort of community building around your work and finding an audience, you can generate value for your work as well. So I think that's kind of like a concerning thing sometimes for some people, where work is not always measured purely on kind of this artistic or cultural value approach that we might be used to within the quote unquote traditional art world. But I think that's an incredibly exciting thing in terms of artists having access to find whatever sort of support they can to further their practice and career. And, I think artists have been doing it online with prints and other sort of like crowdfunding and other types of experiences as well. But I think it sort of blew the floodgates open in terms of what might be possible within that digital space for some artists.
Mike, you have your virtual hand up. If you want to jump in with anything, please feel free.
Yeah, so I have a question about the technology. So blockchain technology seems very solid, and then you move up to crypto, which allows you to have these financial transactions into NFT, which is still a very speculative space, although I think it's a foundational software or system that's going to really start to become more and more ubiquitous. But talking about the ubiquitous qualities of this, to me, the more quickly this is embraced, the more it has the potential to profit artists and creators. And you see this issue with AI and the idea that these images are out there floating around and they're being reused, and then put into these AI generators, and they produce. Like, if this whole system had been in place, those photographs from the past that are being put into these AI generators, those could have had some kind of profit margin involved in them if they were
Absolutely.
functioning through crypto and NFTs. And so I guess my question is, like, how do you see this becoming like ubiquitous to operating systems and just integrated like the music industry is? It's, of course you can still steal music, but it's much, much more difficult to steal music versus stealing an image. And so if we had the same technology integrated into the operating systems and into the files themselves, that profit margin is going to explode for creatives.
Yeah, there's already some of this happening with what is often termed screen casting or art casting. So like the Samsung Frame TV, for example, or there's a few other apps that kind of integrate with smart TVs that are doing exactly this. They're like leveraging blockchain or blockchain-like technologies to create a system for distributing royalties based on screencast to artists. And if their work is interesting or desirable to people and it's shown more, it might be 0.001 cent or, whatever it is, just like with music streams. But it can accumulate and it can, have a meaningful impact on some artists. And again, it's not like artists are like flocking to shift into the digital space fully and abandoning everything else within their practice. I think most artists, like all of the ones that we've worked with and all of the examples that might have appeared on screen, have diverse and multifaceted practices where, this can just be one element of how they work and how they distribute their work or find new audiences for their work. And for other artists, and we encourage this, you sort of explore that and you decide if it makes sense, just like, I don't know, a photography book, for example. It's not like every project needs to be in book form, or not every project is an exhibition. It might be a website, or it might be an immersive projection, or that's the exciting thing about the medium of photography is it's sort of it's highly reproducible and experiential in a lot of different forms, and lives very well in all those forms, as opposed to a lot of other media which might feel like impossible to translate into another form.
So if anybody else wants to jump in and ask a question or have some thoughts on the direction of NFTs, feel free to unmute and share your question or your thoughts. So I'll ask another question because I'm very interested in what you were talking about earlier with the physical digital, bridge. And this is part of what we're going to hope to do in the new photography area at the research center with Rackler Murphy. And so I just want to get some like deeper thoughts on how. So I'm interested in like the VR space. Like I'm wanting to like experiment and explore with that. And I know museums have been trying to experiment and explore with that and usually trip up and fail. But I think there's a new opportunity with that also, especially with the way that a lot of NFT physical and digital galleries are creating these kind of spaces now, and you can actually enter into them. So just can you, generally, I guess, explain how you see that kind of evolving with the space? I have a 9-year-old son. He is full on VR, in there all the time, moving around. And I see where it's going. And how do you feel about that?
I mean, it's difficult to predict where it will go, but I'm sure that like all these technologies, they'll become more and more frictionless. So it'll just be easier for people to do and to utilize if they want to. I mean, I'm feeling pretty confident that in a short matter of time, things like Web3 enabled wallets will just be built into your, browsers that you use, or they'll be on your phone, just like an Apple Wallet. And having this sort of like access to some of these Web3 components or digital identities, like I was talking about, will become more frictionless. And I think the same is true for some of those virtual spaces and virtual experiences. I mean, again, some people are just not going to be interested in it, but I think what's most exciting probably is not really replicating what sort of works or what kind of conventions exist within our physical world into those spaces and just kind of like creating what looks like a gallery or a museum. I mean, that can have its purpose too. And in fact, like during the pandemic, a lot of people did really high quality scans of their physical spaces to allow people to explore them from anywhere in the world and kind of see the actual gallery in virtual form. But I think some of the more exciting things that I've seen have been people who have like sort of blown all of the constructs out of the water about what a digital space can be and what it can feel like or look like to experience something like images or something like photography within a space like that, where, similar to artists that do really interesting things with the conventions of a physical space in a gallery, or artists that kind of push the form of a book in interesting ways to create new connections or different layers between images. I think that these digital spaces or digital experiences have the potential to do things like, allow you to pass through images or like encounter layers of content that exist in relation to images that like you can't experience or grasp in other ways, or, incorporate audio elements or other, kind of combinations of media that might inform your experience. And, I think there'll be, just like there already is, there's architects in the world that design spaces and think about spaces. There's a number of people who design digital spaces and are compensated for it very well, and like are creative artists and architects that kind of understand some of the conventions and possibilities of these spaces. So I think it's a super exciting thing for artists to think about. I think it's obviously an important thing for institutions to think about, especially if they're engaged with, the digital space or new technology, or like thinking about, the future or developments in new media. It's kind of like a ripe frontier for experimenting and, failing. Like some things will work, and also doing things that are just like, we might look back on as being like totally memorable and kind of perception altering in terms of what's possible.
Shane, any wild predictions for what the NFT and photography world will look like 5, 10, 20 years from now?
Not wild predictions, more, I mean, I hope kind of just a steady evolution of some of these things. I think we're still in the very, very early days of these kinds of technologies developing. And it's difficult for our human brains to even imagine what's possible sometimes and extrapolate in these ways. We're not really programmed to do that, actually. But, my hope is that things kind of develop in a way that, as I alluded to, become easier, become more frictionless, have less kind of confusion or risks or security concerns or volatility or, whatever it might be that allows things to feel easier and more accessible to people to explore. I mean, those that want to. I mean, reducing those barriers, I think, is exciting. And as I mentioned, like, I think that, the same way that we browse the internet and we don't go, oh, I'm going to go like on the, whatever hypertext protocol right now. You just sort of like use the internet. You don't think about what you're doing. I think that's the same kind of thing we'll experience with something like the NFT. It's like the technology is this like actually kind of charged term that, sometimes is liked or disliked by different people depending on who you're talking to, but it's literally just a technology that can be utilized in interesting ways by artists or by the California DMV. And at some point, we probably won't be referring to it as, the sort of technical aspects of what it is. So that's kind of the future I see. Like there's a world of physical creating and physical collecting, and there's a world of digital creating and digital collecting, and all of the great things that go on within those worlds, and all the things that you're not interested in too, and you don't pay attention to if you're not.
Very cool. Well, unless anyone has any questions or comments, I think that that might do it. I think that was really wonderful. Thank you, Shane.
Well, no, thank you guys for having me. And I mean, I'm a relatively accessible person online. So if anyone is here listening, or maybe listening to this in the future, and you might have questions, or you were too shy to ask a question, or you just want to engage in some way, you can find me and you can reach out. And I'm always happy to be helpful with people navigating both the contemporary art world, as well as emerging digital spaces and technology, and where those overlap and intersect.
Cool.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say thank you to everybody that did attend and was here for the live meeting, and that we will have another meeting in a month. So we're going to have these once a month for the next 3 months, and that'll be season 1, and then we're going to look to a season 2 and a season 3. So, Gregory, if you have any last remarks.
Yeah, just a little preview. On December 6th, we're going to be speaking with Oliver Weso, who is a really tremendous artist and was one of the earliest pioneers of photographers who adopted digital technologies. He was working with image manipulation before Photoshop, actually in the mid-'80s. So we're going to talk with him about his past work and then his new experiments that he's been doing with AI. So I hope you all can come back and join us for that. It'll be really great.
I'll definitely come back. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you all. Have a good evening, and we will see you again.
Take care.
So long. Have a good night.